Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette, and so happy to bring you another episode of Stay Curious. Glad,
I
that,
forgot to get audio.
glad that you're all joining us as the audio. What's wrong?
Second,
Okay. Hello, everybody.
got it now.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette, and so glad to bring you another episode of Stay Curious. You know, for 20 years, our museum is a nonprofit that's been preserving the birth of the American space age. And we're so proud to do that right here in Brevard County, the delivery room of America's space age. And we've got two exciting missions to talk about today. First will be the first world's rendezvous of two crewed spaceships, Gemini 7 and Gemini 6, meeting in space 56 years ago today. And then we have the Apollo 17 lifting off an alien world for the last time man has done that 49 years ago today. And we'll show you the video of that. And Marty Winkle, my cameraman and engineer behind the controls there, he actually worked on the lunar module for Grumman and had part of his job as electrical engineer was making sure the connections and wires, 14 miles of wires in this lunar module, were right for this liftoff. So you're going to enjoy a little program, but we got a couple astronaut birthdays, and I am happy to say that I talked to this lady today. It's not a birthday, Marty. This is Laura Shepard Churchley, who just went to space with Blue Origin. And I was handed the phone today, and she's on the other end asking about some Mercury hats that Blue Origin wants, and had a wonderful chat with Laura Shepard Churchley here. She's in the Space Coast in February and promised to be either on Stay Curious. I'm going to ask her to be our Women in Space panel we're going to do, our celebration series in March. But she is also proud to say that she is the chairman of the board of the very important Astronaut Scholarship Foundation that her father and the other Mercury astronauts founded to get scholarships for kids wanting to go and pursue aerospace and engineering and all those good things. So wonderful to talk to you, Laura Shepard Churchley, and can't wait to meet you personally. A delightful woman. I had to ask her about her flight to space. First I told her I was mad that a football player kind of upstaged her, because after all, 60 years to the year that her father, Alan Shepard, went to space, America's first man in space, and then, of course, he was the commander of Apollo 14, the third moon landing. She said she would do it again, going on a Blue Origin rocket ride to the edge of space and back. Of course, it was a suborbital flight. She said she felt normal and loved being in zero G, and it was a lot of fun and breathtaking at the same time, calling the view of the Earth's horizon just indescribable. So wonderful conversation. Thank you. And I'll be looking for those Mercury hats for you and get them off to you as soon as we get them in one of our warehouses here. So also wanted to say we've got an astronaut birthday today, or actually belated birthdays to astronaut stargazer Robert Parker, who turned 83, and Katie Coleman. Katie's right here playing the flute on the space station. Katie's 61. They share a birthday on December 14th. And Robert here, Robert Allen Ridley Parker was born in New York City on December 14th, 1936, but grew up in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts. And Catherine Grace Katie Coleman was born December 14th in 1960 in Charleston, South Carolina, one of my favorite towns I visited. Parker here was a scientist astronaut in the selection group of those scientific astronauts in August 67. He flew an STS-9. Oh, went the wrong way. He's that way. There's Robert.
87.
Huh?
He said in 67.
He was selected as an astronaut in 1967 as in the scientific astronaut group. Yes, he flew STS-9 in 1983, waited a long time to fly, in STS-35, the first all-astronomy astrolab. So tried to find recent pictures of him, and I couldn't find one. Katie Coleman, nope, they're back to Laura Shepard. Katie Coleman here playing the flute took it to space several times of her 180 days in space, including that long duration mission Expedition 26. She's taken several flutes to space for you musicians out there, including a penny whistle from Paddy Maloney of the Chieftains, a very famous band, and an old Irish flute from Matt Mallory of the Chieftains, and a flute from Ian Anderson, the lead of the band, rock band Jethro Tull. So very cool that they celebrating their birthdays. Katie Coleman, 61, frequently on the Space Coast. Maybe we'll get to interview her one day on Stay Curious. And Robert Parker, 83. Well, let's get to the space flights on this date in history, Marty. Gemini 6, of course. There's a long history of it trying to be launched in June or July. The Gemini rocket didn't reach orbit, so they instead of putting another target out there, they said, let's make Gemini 7 the target in December. And so they did. Gemini 7 with astronauts Frank Borman and Shaky, Jim Lovell, nicknamed Shaky. We're in space 10 days. When these two guys, the general, Tom Stafford on the left and his commander, Wally Schirra on the right, first launched on this date in 1965, 56 years ago. But 3 days earlier, they had a launch abort that they didn't pull the D-ring and eject out of there. We talked about that some yesterday with Mark Goodkind. Thank you for your wonderful conversation. Go watch that oral history of sorts with Mark Goodkind we did yesterday. He worked on the Mercury through shuttle programs and wrote the launch manual for the GT-76 mission, as they called it. So these guys were launched today in less than 3 orbits. They chased down the Gemini 7 astronauts, and there's their launch. And imagine looking feet away from the buddies that you trained with for years as an astronaut. And there they are in the windows waving at you and so forth. The famous photos that we've seen, there's so few of them that you've seen them all. I tried to pick one that was sort of uncommon. And I think this is GT6 looking at 7. They should have had some sort of insignias on there to separate them. But they had a lot of fun with that. They did station keeping. Wally Schirra found it very easy to drive around in space, going 17,500 miles an hour, 8 thrusters, just puffs of gas moving you around. It was a lot of fun, he said. And then he let Stafford take the stick for a little turn around there. They were within the feet of each other. And like I said, just how cool would that be to see your buddies in the windows there? I don't see many pictures where you can see them in the windows. But and then they stayed up in orbit for just a full day and then landed within 9 miles of the aircraft carrier. And then when Gemini 6 came down 3 days from now, I think the 18th or 19th of December, they had a very accurate 6 miles away from the recovery ship. Now, keep this in mind. Yes, Marty?
I thought 6 came down first.
6 did come down first,
Okay.
within 9 miles of the recovery. They were just a day in space, 24 hours. And then 7 stayed up for another 3 days. The guys read books because they were bored, and they were told to take some books up there. And now keep in mind, Jim Lovell and Frank Borman are both 93 years old. And let's see, this is 1965. So 3 years later, they're going to be orbiting the moon with Jim Anders 3 years after this mission. Think about that on Apollo 8, which we'll, of course, be talking about next week, Christmas week. And there is Frank Borman in his 90s. The general's 91 years old, I believe. He does live in a little condo down here on the Space Coast. Our good friends Gene Wright and Ken Kramer frequently see the general because he buys masks off of Gene and other things. Yeah?
Stafford, you said Borman.
Oh, I say Borman. Thank you, Marty. That's why I got Marty here. That is the General Tom Stafford, okay, in front of the Gemini 6 spacecraft that is in his wonderful museum in Stafford, called the Stafford Air and Space Museum in Weatherford, Oklahoma. Less than a mile west of Oklahoma City. I've been there 4 times, but I need to go back because this wasn't there when I was there my last time over 3 years ago. We love General Stafford, and he has been a very nice contributor to our museum from time to time. I want to emphasize how small these vehicles were. Okay, there they are. That's actually the two. You can tell Stafford's a little thin in the hair there, and I assume that would be next to him, Shara. Get a little rocket fuel there, folks. And these during an ejection, those gull wings were supposed to fly open, and rocket motors on these ejection seats, like a jet fighter, would take them up to 800 feet, and a parachute would come out. And thank God they didn't have to do that, because they were in 100% oxygen, and those solid rocket motors would have made a fireball out of that most likely. But very cramped space to spend 2 weeks. As much as I like Marty, I couldn't do it, Marty, with you and me in there. All right, we would be hitting the reentry button within days of that. And here is the abort, very dangerous abort, one of the most dangerous in spacecraft history. There, where there was really no way to get out of an abort situation in Gemini, and we might do a whole program on that one day. But let's segue into Apollo 13. On the moon was this beautiful lunar module. 17. Thank you, Marty. Had a long day today. I'm wearing my Christmas shirt because we're having a Brevard Astronomical Society Christmas party today here at the museum. And they have a Facebook site. But there's the lunar module that I'm going to talk about here with our 3 astronauts. Sitting down is Commander Gene Cernan, sitting in the lunar rover. And to the left there is Harrison Jack Schmidt. And then, of course, you've got orbiting the Earth, orbiting the moon, for 3 days, was Evans. Yes, Ron Evans. I always got to look his name up, his one-and-done flight. Ron Evans died at age 56 of a fatal heart attack after this mission. So sad. But Cernan died a few years ago in his 80s, and Schmidt is one of the 4 moonwalkers still alive. But we want to talk about and show you the last liftoff off of the moon. Marty, I'm so proud that you had something to do with this as an electrical engineer for Grumman. And here is Marty. Just blow that up there for me, please. There is all of the pyrotechnics on a lunar module that I'm holding in my hand here, and it details things like the 4 corners had the bolts that had to be sheared. I'll tell you about that in a second. There was a guillotine that is there to the left. That's K there, Marty. That's the guillotine that had to sever all these wires and pipes and so forth with pyrotechnic charges. On the Apollo missions, over 210 pyrotechnic devices were on the Saturn V stack, the command module, the service module attached to it, and the lunar module ascent and descent sections. They were used from everything from extending the landing gear on the LEM was brought out with pyrotechnics. The main drogue chutes on reentry of the command module and ensuring fuel was on the correct side of the tank were all had pyrotechnics involved in them. And in the tanks, that was the ullage, what it called, where they would fire rockets to shift things over so that the fuel was over the intake of the fuel. Now, on the 3 stages that Marty knows too well, and I can't get him to come on live to talk about, but, pardon me?
2 stages.
Well, there's 3 things that Marty's holding up 2, but I'm reading here 3-stage process that took place in tenths of a second.
So what you mean?
All right. First was they had to fire circuit interrupters to cut off electrical signals between the 2 stages, because these are 2 stages. All right. This has its own engine on the descent stage, had its own engine, and the ascent stage had its engine to get off of here. The moon, in a sense, the descent stage became the launch platform, and 6 of these are on the moon. It's what the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiters have done. Why they chose that, I don't know, and further research down the line we'll find out, maybe, because I'm curious about it. Marty, do you know why they didn't just use one engine for descent and ascent off the top of your head? I'd say it's weight constraints.
The ascent stage was more, almost so few parts.
Yeah, Marty said the ascent stage was designed, it only had 4 moving parts, I believe. It was hypergolic fuels that once they hit each other, they ignited. There was no igniter. But they did use liquid oxygen igniting a fuel on the descent stage.
Engine gimbal.
Yeah, descent engine gimbal and stuff like that. Good reasons and for that. But first, they cut off all electricity between the 2 stages. Then they fired the sheared the 4 explosive nut and bolt assemblies that were affixed to that held it together. And where were those points been, Marty? We didn't have a pre-production meeting on that, but there are 4 places around this that had to do. And then third is the guillotine that I'm going to show you an enlargement of here. This is the guillotine attachment that I was so fascinated to learn about. Oh, whoa. Get out of that, Mark. There, sorry. Why isn't that? There. Oh,
You hit the wrong button.
hit the wrong button. There is the guillotine that separated all these massive combed lines of electrical wires and plumbing. Okay. So how big was this, Marty? Wasn't very big. Marty's going like it was only about this big, but everything was running through it. And they had on one side, you see the shear pin on either side. I go, why did they have 2? Well, because that was a redundancy. If one didn't fire, the other one was strong enough to cut through. And there you see up and down the vertical there. You might circle that, Marty, is the conduit that contained all this. So within 1/10 of a second, they shut off the electricity. They fired the bolts that held it down physically, and they sheared the plumbing and electrical connections that had to be there to communicate with the descent stage. And once they did that, that popped off in about, I think it took 6 minutes to rendezvous to get to orbit, and then they rendezvoused. Let's look at that, Marty, as you've got the liftoff of Apollo 17. And there we go. No audio, but this is taken from the lunar rover that was parked about 1,000 yards away. There it goes. And then they're panning it from Houston to follow. All that shrapnel was from the gold foil, the blankets that insulated the vehicle important parts and some of the scientific instruments. And boy, they did a good job of following that. The first time they did it was Apollo 15, and then they did it on Apollo 16. And a joystick, they're following it there until it gets on a run. Do one more time, Marty. We got to see that twice. And watch the shrapnel go. And then they kept it on for hours after the mission. I think they turned it off and on occasionally. There you go. Imagine all that happening in 1/10 of a second to separate all that. And that weighs, the whole thing weighed 17 tons, didn't it? No, it was 17 feet high. It weighed 10 tons. Each section was 5 tons, or each section 10 tons, Marty. You remember? Putting him on the spot there. Weighed a lot. So there it is, roaring away to go up and get with Ron Evans, and they had over 200 pounds of rock. You're going to see one of those rocks to end our program today. These devices were generally reliable. A certain level of trepidation about them is understandable. Blowing up some high explosives to drive a big blade through wires doesn't exactly sound like the most controlled process, even though it actually was. So 14 miles of wire was on there. And the explosive had to trigger the guillotine, and the blade had to cut some pretty thick cables at the same time. At the same time which the rocket engine started. So think about that. Now, our Apollo 17, that was 49 years ago, folks. And hopefully we go back to the moon in 4 or 5 years, and we will see more pictures of this live. Like I say, when we go back to the moon, there was no live video of it landing, of any of the 6 missions, including the last one 49 years ago. When we go back, there's going to be so many cameras everywhere outside and inside the cabin and everything. It's going to look like a football control room for all their cameras at a football game. That's my prediction, Marty, and I'm sticking to it. So one thing that happened that was kind of shocking when they got film back was here is Apollo 17, the Lunar Module 12 Challenger, before it docks. Look underneath there, and you see some of the insulation. But I couldn't find where they did a turnaround, Marty, to show on Apollo 16 the damage that was caused by the blowback of that exhaust lifting off in the launch pad. And there was no real flame trench there, okay, at all, because it all had to be used to boost. So, although I think there was a tiny little flame trench underneath there, Marty, as I recall.
It's just basically Mylar blankets.
Mylar blankets, Marty said was there. So what you're seeing there, and circle that damage, Marty, if you would, please. Arrow it, okay. Is on the back side of the lunar module. This was rippling effects, ripping off some of the covers of things there. It didn't hurt the integrity of the cabin because the astronauts are in the other end. Show them where the cabin is, separated from this section. So there was no damage on there, but it was kind of interesting to see that damage and here is Apollo 16 again. That's Apollo 17 now, going up to the America, the command module, and which was command module 114. So they spent actually 2 days in orbit around the Earth. They got rid of the lunar module. I asked Marty and other people about it. It was spent. After 3 days on the moon, there was no life left in it, and it would have just been more of a hazard to keep it tugging along with you, orbit around the moon. So they spent 3 days up there, and there's Gino checking out charts. 3-ring binders up there. That 3-ring binder is something they throw into a vat maybe to get you material that was on the moon's surface and orbiting the moon. We've got coins of that we've sold from time to time. Yeah, just the metal portion. Marty says someone buys that and clips off that ring and throws it in. However, there were certain things in metal that was itemized that were put in metal coins for Apollo 11, like a bolt off of the reentry command module. They did things like shave. As you saw, Harrison Jack Schmidt grew a pretty healthy beard in 3 or 4 days not shaving it, and there he is getting rid of it. Like all men, you save that mustache to last, and I saw a picture of him with the mustache, and he looked real good in it, but he just decided to whack it off before he landed back on Earth. And there is Ron Evans and Jack Schmidt in the background, giving you an idea a little bit how cramped it is back in there as they spent their time around the moon. Doing this, looking at gorgeous views of the moon, 60 miles high. The last human beings to put their eyes on the surface of the moon that close. Go out and look at the moon tonight, all right? It's moving towards full phase. It's going to look gorgeous wherever you're at, rising up above the trees and buildings and mountains, maybe where you're at, or off the ocean where we're at. It looks so gigantic, but that's the moon illusion. You can always cover it with an outstretched hand and your little finger. It's only half a degree across. And recently, a story, so go out and look at the moon tonight. That's the planet Jupiter to the far right. Saturn is in between them, and the brightest star you see closest to the sun after sunset is Venus. They will be visible for another couple weeks together. Then Venus is going to drop down real quick and disappear and pop up in the morning sky in late January. Jupiter and Saturn will be up there for a couple more months. So check them out. Marty, you got a comment, or he's feverishly
trying to write the person's name. Mian Hussein Levy Wangani is followed.
Okay.
Haven't seen that name before.
All right.
Can we write it down for him?
Yeah, sure. We've got a lot of new followers, and we're going to rack your names up and thank you in our week of holiday cheer we're going to bring you next week. We will have shows on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and a wonderful interview we recorded on Thursday. Mayan is Saint Levy Mangraha. All right. So Mayan, thank you for watching. We're glad that everyone's watching on Facebook Live, YouTube, Twitch. They're liking us, sharing us, following us. I saw a lot of you people on subscribing on YouTube yesterday. I was writing your names down. So important for our humble nonprofit to reach out to you and let you know that we love our astronauts. We love the space program. We love sharing with you history in many ways that maybe you can only get at one place. To end today's show, one last picture you're looking at. As you're looking up at the moon, it just looks dull and gray and blah. But no, that's why we sent a geologist to the moon, Jack Schmidt, 49 years ago. God bless you. He's 86 years old, Jack Schmidt. I've met him 4 times and talked to him extensively over a 3-day period. He said the moon had many colors in those rocks. And here is a rock that a story this week, they're reinvestigating with new modern technology that wasn't available 50 years ago. Okay, that's part of science, is saving things for a whole other generation to look at. This pristine rock is about the size of a pretty big rock, about the size of a grapefruit. And look at the colored gold, yellowish speckled in there. This doesn't, that is why I said Jack Schmidt went there, and Gene Cernan, the commander, was grateful to let him sort of take over as the commander of the whole geology mission, because he saw things like this and brought this back. And this is an important piece of rock that says there might have been a period of the moon where things heated up again after we think most of the craters were crashed into the lunar surface. That was a viscosity of like 10 weight oil. The lava on the moon that caused the dark areas that are lava seas frozen was about like 10 weight motor oil, and not like molasses or syrup, okay? Wasn't that thick. And you got 1/6 gravity, so things move around a little differently. So this is a rock 49 years ago brought back to Earth by Apollo 17 that again is becoming investigated as we speak. So Marty, wanted to just say thank you for Laura Shepard Churchley for taking the time to talk to me today. Can't wait to get you on our Stay Curious program. She said she would. And I told you she was chairman of the Astronaut Scholarship Foundation. There she is again. And they do such worthy things, and have her father and the Mercury astronauts all founded that foundation for education scholarships. So shout out to her. So Marty, another great program. Thank you for all you do. Jessica Galloway was not in studio for the first time. I think we did it on our own, Marty. She was on the helping us through setup there. But again, you can teach old dogs new tricks if you could teach us to do this. And we're so happy to do it. I'm fading away there. I got the green screen conflicting with my shirt here today. A little, of course, greenery in it for our astronomy holiday picnic celebration we're having today. How's that for a safe call for a not stepping on anybody's toes? So we're so grateful to all of you watching us out there, and tell your friends to watch our Stay Curious program live every day at 4 o'clock on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook Live. And of course, you can watch if you're bored over the holidays. We're approaching 400 episodes. Nobody's added them up for us yet, Marty. I guess I've got to do that in the year and a half, well over a year and a half since March 2020, that we've helping you stay curious. So it's holiday time. If you've not booked your trip to our museum, please think about it next year, because Marty and I can't wait to see you in our museum to bridge the space between us.